How's it going, everyone? Eulier Gonzalez here again, and in today's we're going to talk about a very sensitive topic, and also one of the things that is asked frequently in a lot of senior software interview, because those companies actually need that you know all of these inner mechanisms, specifically subclassing and how subclassing work in JavaScript. So as you can imagine, if you're gonna work for any company that is big enough, all right, not only top tech company, but also let's say Airbus or Costco, Walmart, or all of these kind of companies, they are facing challenge that require you to know all of this inner mechanism as a way to not only help them to pursue and to meet their goals, but also as you can improve your analytical skills as well as your technical communications and soft skill, which is the reason why I'm recording this series of videos. So here we are. Here, this is the is this one. It's subclassing. This is the asynchronous bar. My bad, sorry. Is this one. Okay, we're going to talk about is, wait, what? Really? Interesting. Okay, I think we have a lot of Zoom. That's right. Okay, so this one, right? The object oh, sorry. Where are my manners? So the object in JavaScript, and how this particular approach will allow you to build or write programs that scale in a professional engineering environment. So this course is taught by Will Sentence, the CEO of CodeSmith. I would really like to collaborate with him if I can as an instructor, because the value that this particular course provides, not only for junior or senior software engineers, is for anyone that, even though they don't hold a technical background, they can get into the industry. And this is one of the beautiful things of this particular industry. Regardless of your background, okay? As long as you understand all of this mechanism and understand how you can now improve your technical communications, the good engineering practice, the soft skill, and the domain or language domain, the domain specific, whether it's in our case with JavaScript, that is something that is beautiful, and one of the things that I love from this particular industry. Okay, so the goal of today's video is to look at how subclassing works with prototype, and why we need to look at that as a way to understand the class keyword, which is now part of the default way of creating objects in in JavaScript, using now the object syntax, but behind the scenes is using this prototype nature. So in the case of Will Sentence, so CodeSmith here, the idea here is to take a lot of people from these boot camps and kind of accelerating into a senior roles. In other words, into roles that they can provide much more value to all of these companies, and also for themselves and their community and their colleagues. So this course, specifically the object programming, we're going to take a look at the introduction. Again, the whole point of today's video is to look at how subclassing works. Okay, with the new keyword, and we're gonna build how we're gonna see how can we build this subclassing with several solutions. All right, so we're gonna make a quick overview of this topic: the introduction to object programming, object creation, prototype, and scope. First things first is this is now giving you the idea of how you can now organize data and its functionality, okay? Which is a challenge that happened in the 60s, where a lot of people back then were now concerned about how they can now bundle this data and relative functionality in one single bundle, okay? So they come up with this object things, object paradigm. So the way you can create now objects is by, well, first, in JavaScript, you can use is now, for example here, you can use is the object literal. What you can use is object.notation, object.create, and then you also can create that with factory functions. So the way how traditional or the sophisticated way, the initial way or the solution one of how you can create objects is by let me take a look at this object creation here. Here is in this way, okay? So you define your functions. Inside of the functions, you're going to define is now an object, an empty object using object literal, and then you're going to add all of the properties that this object needs, the data, and then it is functionality. So anytime you want to create now this objects, you just only call that and pass the proper parameters. The issue with this approach is that what happens is, if you want to create several users here, okay, you not only attach is the proper data, which is something important, like the name and the score. Most likely they are unique. Usually they are unique, but the functionality remains the same. We only care about that this functionality work with the proper data, but we don't want to reserve space in memory every time we create that object. So how can we do this? Well, the solution to is by creating is a function constructor by using is the object.create, where this object.create is creating now is the reference. In other words, we are getting all of our functionality, for example, like increment, okay? And then we create that in, and then we put them into their own objects. So anytime we create an object, we're gonna create is also a reference to the functionality. In other words, we're creating a reference to that object, okay? So that's great. That started to make a lot of sense, and which is part of the solution too, okay? In the solution too, as you can see, is this one. So far, so good. Because now, anytime we want to create a new object, we are effectively saying, hey, this is the relevant data, and this is the functionality, but the functionality, I want you to point to this functionality. And the way to do that is by using the object.create, which anytime you create, you use this built-in function, it creates an empty object, and then here you're telling, hey, you're telling to JavaScript, I want you to now look at the proto, which is a hidden property called prototype, based on the script or the ECMAScript specification. And from there, I want you to now take a look at that hidden property that contains a reference that you can have access to other properties. In other words, it contains a reference so you can have access to the prototype, or you can have access to the property and methods through the prototype change. okay, or through this reference here. So that's exactly what it's doing here. So we are all doing this manually, which is maybe good or not, depending on the use case, all right? But as you can see, this is something that we need to do for any object that we want to create, right? We need to indicate is what are the functionality, okay, like this. What is the functionality that this object can have access through the prototype change, through this hidden property called dunder that has a reference to all the property on that particular object to the prototype, okay, where inside of that property is where you hold all of that property methods, for example in this case like increment and logging, okay. And then you can add the proper data, the relevant data for these objects. So again, this is something that is quite tedious, it's very handcrafted, and the people from ECMAScript come out with this idea and say, okay, you know what, let's instead of creating this reference anytime we need to access to this object, that's going to automate that process for you by introducing this new keyword. So the new keyword, which is come from the EX6, okay, is telling you, well, I'm going to do a lot of things, a couple of things behind the scenes, especially the automation of which property this object can have access to. In other words, the proto change. I'm going to automate that process, all right? And this new particular way of doing this is now here on the solution 3, okay? So where now you first define your function constructor, where you're going to now build is the relevant data here, okay? And because function constructor has, first thing first, in JavaScript everything is an object, and the shape of that object is that it contains their own property as well as hidden properties, okay? So if you take a look at the object ECMAScript here, not the function object, which is something that we're going to talk about that, but the notation convention, the object here, object type it is, exactly, okay, so the object types. So the object type, as we can see here from the specification, it contains some hidden properties, okay, like value, heritable, get, set, enumerable, and configurable. But this is our property attributes, okay? And the object itself now hold this particularly methods, get prototype off, set prototype off, and all that kind of thing. So why this is important, you might wonder, okay? Why this is important? Let me see if we can take a look at the object. Exactly, the object exactly. You may wonder why this is important. As you can see, you can look at the properties, okay? So the object constructor, part of the fundamental objects, it has now a hidden property called prototype, okay? Where it points now to, especially the object's constructor, as it is. But as you can see, this is all the property that this object has, right? That you can have access to. So why this is important? Because with this solution 3, which is using the new keyword, okay, now when you use the new keyword, it's going to do a couple things here, but you need to build that in this particular order, or in this particular way. And you may wonder, why is this? Remember that after all, one of the end goal of the object-oriented programming first is to how you can organize relevant data and functionality together, okay? And now our challenge here with JavaScript is that how can we now have access to property from other objects as a way to be memory efficient when it comes to reuse functionalities. This is important because now with this particular mindset, you say, all right, this is the way of how you can create objects using the new keyword. You first define a function here, and because in JavaScript everything is an object, okay? In this objects, for example, functions are a special type of object. Arrays are a special type of objects. It means that in the case of functions, it holds several hidden properties and can have access to the object. So if we take a look now here at the function objects as it is, the function per se now have this ability to add or append functionality. In other words, append is properties to that, as well as to be callable objects. So the way of how you can add that, or where you can add this functionality, okay, is on the prototype, which is part of the object data type. So why this is important? Because since we know that the object has several hidden properties that we can have access to. So for example, object here, okay, fundamental of objects. So object here has the properties of the object constructor, has a prototype internal, and also has a length, okay? And this is objects, and functions are a special type of objects that you can call of that. And also you can add functionality, or you can add properties to that. And you're gonna do that under the prototype. So if you don't believe me, no problem. Let's gonna create now here is a function here called user creator, right? So this user creator will be a function here that right now doesn't even accept nothing, okay? And it return is just an empty object. Let's gonna put it here name, right? And this now going to return, you can say is this, define the user like so. In terms of performance, it is better to define is these objects and not using the dot notation. Something that you're gonna look at that, but yeah. So comes user like this, and then we're gonna return is the object user, right? So far so good, no problem. And well, let me now actually is create that user. So user creator with the name Euler. That's right. All right. So now that I got my object here, as you can see, it also has a prototype. So inside of the prototype is where the proto hidden property actually lives, that has a reference to what property can have access to, in this case to the object itself, and the object is the last of this chain. So if we want, for example, let's say here it's gonna say here, hey, I want you to define is a variable here called, well, Euler, okay, or you can say user1, okay, user1, and let's going to now create this object here, okay. And if we take a look at the user1, well, we got our object with this hidden property called prototype, okay. And one of the interesting things of this function or object, because at the end of the day user.creator is just a function that is running its properties. One of the great things of this is that the user creator, as we can see here, has now the ability, or this function now have this ability that we can add properties to that. So for example, in the user creator, since we define that as a function, it's not going to work, but we can now add is, as you can see, it has some of these hidden properties, okay, and this prototype actually is pointing to the function constructor, which is the object, and actually points to null. So again, why am I showing you this? Because, all right, with this particular approach, where it tells you, hey, let's going to create is now a function that is going to return the data, okay, and then as a way to now create the functionality that this object will have, let's going to use that on the prototype. And here's when you listen a lot of people in the industry say, hey, put in the prototype, put in the prototype, put in the prototype. When you want to share now functionality across all of these objects that can have access to this. All right, so this is particularly the way of how you can define here. So if we walk through this user1.create increment, the process it is, well, JavaScript now is going to evaluate is this increment function that exists in this user1. If that exists, it will say, okay, because I don't have that defined in my properties, let me take a look now at the proto, okay, that points to the prototype function construction. Functions, after all, they have this hidden property called prototype, where you can now append all of this functionalities. So as you can see here, this function construction, okay, that has this particular property called prototype, is inside of that function when you're going to add all of this relevant functionality to work with this data. That's the key point of this, okay? And especially if you're gonna work with backend services and that kind of thing, this is very, very, very important since you're going out to deal is in this particular realm. All right. So the new keyword, after all, that background was important to understand what this new keyword is doing. So the new keyword is automating the process of creating this reference for you. So how you can create this? By defining first your function constructor, where first the value of this, it'll be an empty object. You can define then your properties to that, and right after that you're going to define is your methods, okay, under the prototype. So far so good, right? This is something that is it works fairly good, right? Quite good, by the way. Okay. Now, what happens is you, for example, need to add more functionality under the prototype. For example, if you need to now, once you define your increment, you need to define is more nested functionality inside of that method on from the prototype. Okay, so this is when the value of this and the scope is important to understand that, because at the end of the day, the value of this based on JavaScript is not lexical. It means that when you define a function, the value of this will be whatever is on the left side, which is one of the rules. Okay, whatever is on the left side. So now you can have access to the proper data and then work on that functionality. But there's a caveat, because what if you don't have anything on the left side, especially if you define here like add function or this nested functionality. So because you don't have anything on the left side, or what you have on the left side is undefined, okay? So JavaScript by default say, hey, let me now, in this case, point to the window object. Sometimes you want that behavior, but for our case, we don't. So how can we fix that? That's when the arrow function kicks in, because after all, arrow functions from the MDN docs, it's creating a closure. A very, very beautiful concept here in JavaScript, which means that now whenever you use an arrow function, the value of this will be whatever it can have access to the outer scope. Or in other words, this closure, because the value of this, when you define inside of an arrow function, it creates a closure. This is the value of this is whatever is on the outside function lexical scope, whatever is on the local memory, or when we define our variables. So that's quite interesting. That's quite brilliant, because now we can have access to the proper data, okay, and then work on that, because of this particular function, because of this behavior that the value of this keywords has, right? Not like this when we define this as an note, when we define this as an arrow function like this. Okay, so far so good. That's actually quite interesting. Okay, before having this arrow function, people use things like trying to define the value of this at here and then store that value, so you can now pass down value on the function, for example on this context using apply and bind, where you can now in that particular function can have access to the proper data. That's where we have things like apply and bind, that kind of thing. That's quite interesting. That's quite powerful. But right now we don't actually need that, okay, at least for creating our new objects, thanks to the arrow function. All right, why, for example, you might why, for example, the value of this actually change this? It's because the nature of JavaScript is dynamic. So depend on the use case or these particular rules, you will have now a particularly different value. So in any case, now that we have this particular approach, okay, and as you can imagine, the next thing that is doing behind the scenes, the value or the keywords like class, extends, and inherit, is using behind the scenes this, okay. But now we have a more syntactically sugar that it look like that we are creating objects in the class, but in the reality we're using is the prototype object-oriented nature of JavaScript. Okay, so before going into this, we will need to know a fundamental concept, especially on object-oriented programming, as a way to pass down property in a way that is memory efficient, in a way that we are reusing some of the other functionality in these new objects here, while adding current functionality. Okay? So that's something interesting. That's quite powerful. Okay? Because with that, okay, right? We can now have, we need to take a look at first how you can do subclassing with function constructor, with the solution to, how you can do that with the new keyword, okay? And then how now can we do that with class? This is one of the fundamental, especially if you grasp your knowledge about this, if you grasp this concept, if you wrap your mind around this, now things will make a lot of sense, especially as you move on in your career and you have access to all of this content. Then you are starting to see what these big companies, whatever their size, but all of them are facing now scalable problems in how they can reuse a lot of these assets, okay, or a lot of this resource into this to cover particularly use cases, to cover particularly business process or operation process. And that's something beautiful. That's to me is quite beautiful. And also one of the things that I really love about working with software in this company, in this industry, is that no matter your background, as long as you can demonstrate and as long as you want to really understand how these mechanisms work, you will find a job. So people will gravitate towards you because they need your knowledge as a way to help them to build their own business. All right, cool. So first thing first, let's gonna look at how can we now make subclassing here. But before that, a little interlude. Why is that? As a way to understand how can we work with subclassing, okay? So we can know what the class keyword and stand is doing behind the scenes, okay? Something crucial if you need to explain that on any software interview. Good. So first we need to look at this interlude, which is function objects, okay, and how now the prototype, what is the behavior what is the default behavior of the prototype, okay? So because in JavaScript everything is an object, so everything can have access to this object prototype. So for example, functions and arrays, okay? So functions now can have access to the properties of the to the property of the objects, as well as it has its own methods. For example, like prototype, like bind, call, apply, to stream, and all of these functions. For example, it's important to understand that the subtle difference of the apply and bind is that the apply, bind, and call. So call and apply, the subtle difference is that the way of how you can now pass arguments. That's the subtle difference. With call, the first parameter is the context. So this is the value of this inside of this function. okay? Whether it's you call that with call or apply. So with call and apply, as well as bind, you pass the first argument is with the value of this as a way to update what this value inside of this function will be. All right. Why is that? As a way to work with the proper data. And the next argument, for example, in the case of call, you pass all of these arguments by comma, separated by comma, and on apply, you pass them as an array. You receive them as an array. So this is, for example, here. Let me see the function construction prototype as a way to show that. There you got it, like this. So bind, as you can see here, apply, accept this as an argument of array. Okay. If you take a look now at the MDN docs here, MDN docs, as oh my god, but for the functions, exactly, but give it that to me in English. That's right. Okay, cool. There you got it. Okay, cool. So as you can see, this is the instance methods that it has. So for example, the call and apply. So apply and call. Okay, so all different here is that the way how it accepts the parameters. Okay, as an array, like apply, and then call, separate by commas. Okay, like this. And the subtle difference between the call and apply and bind is that apply and calls, both of them, when this function is called, it's going to inject this bind. But on the bind is when you usually wants to pass the value of this at definition, not at runtime. Now that we know this, okay, that this function contains these particular properties, and the nature of this, the default nature of object-oriented programming is that it's going to have access to property and methods until it reach using the proto reference, okay, until the proto reference reach to the object, which points to null. It say, hey, enough. This is it. All right. So now we can actually see is the subclassing, and how subclassing works with factory functions, or in other words, with the solution one, by creating our objects is using the object literal as it is. I mean, by the solution 2, sorry, which is using is the object.create, where here we can have now manually is set the reference of the proto. We can manually indicate to this object, hey, this is what are the property and method that you can have access from this object. So the first thing is quite simple. Oh no. Yeah, so the first thing is quite simple here, right? As a way to put a practice this, let me actually create here new one. Okay, so here we're gonna create is this new user. Okay, let's going to create now the user here for new user. Sorry. That's going to create now is following is the sophisticated approach of creating objects, which is the solution 2, which is functions object, creating object with functions, and that is, well, this This is our function here, user creator, where you're going to receive the name and the coins. You're going to build is an object here, where here, this is when we create our object. In this case, we say this that object here, we say user, and we call is the object dot create. What we're gonna now pass is the methods that we can have access to, which means that we need to define first is our function. Can you see what I'm looking right now? I think you do. Okay. Yes. Yeah, you do. All right. Let me actually zoom in. All right. Cool. So here we need to create is our functions here, but because this asec is an object that we can have access to the property and methods, we're going to create here is our object as a const. User is the functions, user functions, okay, as an object. You may wonder, is like, why you use is const. This is part of the approach that is being widely adopted on the development, the JavaScript here, as a way to say, if you want to create a new object, it's better to create a new state of that instead of mutating this new object. Why is that? People from Java will really get it. So yeah. And yeah, comes user function. Here we're going to define is the add. It's an object, and here this is a function that is say, hey, I want you now to add the number. Hey, let me want to access to this, and because I don't have any data defined, I need to define that data right below here to say, hey, this user will have is the name, and the user dot user dot name, user dot coins. Okay, so hey, I want you to now add coins here. You know, let's say for our use case, I'm gonna say increment 1 coin. Okay, so what is the subtle difference between this operator and putting here or putting this, right? Is that first is going to increment this value and then assign it. Perhaps this is the behavior that you want, or is say I'm going to assign it and later on I'm going to increment that. On the next round, I'm going to increment that. So for a use case, this might be the way to go. All right. And now that we define is this functionality, let's go to define is another functionality here. Let's say is hello. So a function here. And then we say, hey, I just want this to only print is coins. Console log here. Hello. Good. So this is the functionality that I want you to pass to this new object that I created anytime I run the function construction, the user created. So let's go to pass now the user function. Okay, so this statement, it indicates to JavaScript, hey, take a look at the proto of these objects and now access to the property and methods from that. In other words, append them and put it in under the prototype. So then let me now return it. return this user, right? That's all. That's all. Pretty much that's it. This is it. And if we want to create now a user one, say this is the user creator. Let's say Patrick. Say Patrick with 5 coins. So now the user one, if it wants to run, is the increment. What you're gonna do is to what can I? Okay, you got it. So what this function we're gonna do is to indicate to JavaScript, hey, I want you to look up the increment if you have that in the objects. You don't have that, don't panic. Go down to the product, this hidden property, so you can now have access or to look up for this increment function if that exists. It exists, all right, run it. So in the case of hello, it will now print hello as it is, right? So far so good. So how can we now extend the functionality or reuse this particular functionality into a new object? This is when things started to get interesting with this approach, because now let's say you want to create is a new user, a pay user, so a pay user, where you're going to receive now the name, okay, as well as the coins, as well as the tier that it belongs to, right? Okay, so here is this. So because of this, all right, now here we're going to create this new user, okay, create pay user, create pay new user, but we cannot use the object.assign here, okay? We can use the object.assign as a way to create those reference. So how can we do this? Because first we will need to call is the user creator, okay, and then is when we're going to pass is the proper function or the proper parameters to this. We need to find a way to when you run this, which contains now the user function, okay, we also want to now bind its our own functions for this pay user, right? So let's go to define is that functions for that pay user functions, right? Let's say, hey, this is the balance, right? It's the balance. That's right. And here is when you define is your functionalities, you know, pay. You can define this as an object, cons, pay user here, pay user functions, and then because this is an object that it contains the proper or the relevant data here, okay, it's gonna say, hey, increment balance, you know. So it's going to now define this function here, and then have access to that balance property for that. All right. This is the way how you can increment that. First, we didn't increment that. We just only coerce this value to be a string. That's what it's doing. The first is coerce that. The second one is actually now set that, establish that, which is increment that, and that's it. That's it. So how can we now set our reference for this new object that we are creating, okay, and have access not only to our current function but also to the base functions from the user creator. With this approach, with this sophisticated approach, we do this. Let me now here is set the prototype off, which means the object dot set prototype off, where here you're telling, hey, the proto that contains the reference of this object here, which must be is the new pay user, exactly. I want you to this exactly. I want you now to bind, which to me is quite fucked up. Exactly. I want you to now bind here for this object is the proto reference, okay, from the pay user functions. Exactly. I want you to now make the reference from this pay user, pay new user. So you're gonna take a look at the proto of this object, all right? Exactly. You're gonna take a look at the proto of this object, with perhaps the order here is quite different, but you're gonna take a look at this these new pay users that has a reference to this base functionality, okay, that have a reference to this base functionality, and also I want you to now update the proto to have access to this new functions, this new functionality, which is paid user function. This with object of set prototype is how you create now this reference for that. That's quite interesting. That's pretty powerful and fucked up. Because here is when you tell to this new object that we create from our user creator that has a reference to the user function, we say not only hold the reference from there, from the base class, but also update the reference of this new pay user object that we create, update the proto to add now this functionality, to point to this new functionality, pay user function. And from there, okay, now you can add the proper functions that you need to. In our case, balance, like balance, and then return the. Oh my god! Oh no! What I did? God damn. And then return that object, right here with this function here, and then return is now that object, which is return is the paid new user. Okay, so this that's the interesting part of looking at subclassing with the solution 2, which is looking at this sophisticated way of how you can create objects using the object.create. All right, so for example, the thing here is that This is quite interesting because even though that you're doing this, because here what you're doing is to this new object that I create here is going to update that. Okay. Okay, this is not to actually update the reference to that. Okay, this is to actually update the reference from the pay new users proto, this new object that we create that can have access to the pay user function. Interesting. And not only that, that then down the line we say, hey, let's go to pay user function here, and let's go to update that to the user function. Okay, first we are creating here is the reference. So we are creating, okay, so we're making is the base class. Okay, so we're making is the base class. Now the proto reference is or have access to the pay user functions like this. Okay, which is interesting. And here, exactly, hey, I want you to have access to the pay user functions. Makes sense. Hey, I want you to this object have access to the pay new user functions. So far so good. This new object that we created, but it has access. Oh, I get it. That's one of the problem here is like, okay, that's one of the problem with this slice here.
So here we go. We can do it in all little new bonus properties like account balance. So this over here is us creating a more specific type of user. So this is the other big side of OOP. Thinking about our application as ever more specific versions of a kind of master class, kind of master version of something. But not having to redo all the work that we did for the first version that produced generic users, but instead use a bunch of that work ourselves to produce paid users, produce moderators. So we're going to produce a paid user that's going to have access to all the user stuff. And I'll talk briefly about how we could say prevent it from having access to some of the user stuff, and also gets bonus stuff. And folks, this version here is the fine-grained control version. We get to do everything by hand here. Solution 3, using the new keyword, is going to automate some of it, but actually honestly create more trouble than it's worth, which is why solution 4 came along and really does clean. There's a lot less code. It does clean it up, but nobody knows how it works under the hood. We will. Okay, good, here we go. Let's walk through this code. It's all sid when you're marked for who you are, which does use a bunch of the object stuff with the input of things. But passing in arguments does not put those as properties in an object. We have to manually do that. Never lose sight of that.
Initially an empty object?
It is exactly an empty object. Never lose sight that object.create is a built-in tool available in JavaScript. Oh, where is it stored? Not on object.prototype. I don't even bring this up. Do you remember how we said there was a big old auto-available thing called object? That is a, I'm not sure I should bring this up, it's very distracting right now, which is a function object combo. Everyone remember this from a moment ago, which had a property on it, Seth? Prototype, side of the dot, a combo. There's no function called create in here. But we can do object.create and run that function. And that's what we're doing here. It has the set of functions available on all objects. Beautiful. All right, just as a little aside there, that object's hidden proto bond linking to
User functions.
user functions. Fantastic, thank you, man. There it is, into user functions. Let's fill in its properties now. Susie, if you don't mind filling in the properties. So we've set up the new user as an object. It's got the user functions bond in the hidden proto property.
Exactly, we
but
have
let's
the
now fill in
user
our actual
bond
properties on it.
here.
User.name. Take it away.
So, wait, what?
With this one, so we're at the new user.name. We're assigning to the new user object what?
With name.
Name, fantastic, a name property, and assigning it what is name at this point as we pass in fill, what is name the parameter going to refer to? calling user creator, we're passing in
We're calling user creator. Exactly. We're passing
Phil, we're passing in 5, and so name
to the score.
is now what, Susie?
Our name is Phil.
Our name is Phil. Fantastic. So what are we assigning to our name property of new user?
Exactly. We're
Uh,
assigning-
string value Phil.
Fantastic. She's spot on. Exactly. Thank you, Susie. And now again, we're assigning the score property and assigning to it what value?
5.
5.
Five.
Fantastic. There it is. And now, what is the final line of this user creator execution context telling us to do, Nick?
we
Got
return
our
this
It's all
object.
good to go, but it's stuck inside user creator. What we're going to do with it?
It's going to be returned
It's going to be returned out
Exactly.
into
memory
under what global constant?
user 1.
User 1. Fantastic. So we know this piece. We've seen this piece. Well, we'll get to user 1 dot say name.
Looks in the user one for the method say name. It does not find it.
Exactly. This is the way how you can do
Goes
it.
to the proto. Points up to user.
Exactly. It look out to the same name under the user one. It's not there. It doesn't panic. It take a look out. It look out of the proto, which points to the user functions. Exactly. Here. Which points to the user function. Exactly. Which points to the user functions. That now would point to the user function object that contain is the same name, and you run it.
Find say name.
Fantastic, Terry. And you gave yourself a score of 4 in there? That's interesting. Very, very nice, Terry. You're spot on, man. So we're successful. We have a lovely user 1 that has access to a set of functions. Beautiful. But now we want to create a more specific type of user. Now we move on to some fairly brutal code
Exactly.
over here on the right-hand side.
We just create a
So I'm going to do a
subfactory
sort of
function.
dotted line across here just to sort of show we've now moved on to the right-hand side. But thank you, man.
Okay, object.
Yeah, user functions, which is an object. Michael, what property do we have?
No, it's because here we are creating is the user creator. Exactly. Here we're now creating is this object, and this object contain is the user one, right? But in this case, new pay user. But here on the set prototype off, because with this object we are now. This is the way how you can. Okay. This is the way how you can now update the proto of each one of those
On
functions,
that object?
or each one of those objects.
Increase balance, which is a function. Excellent, man. Thank you. Okay, so I slow down at this point because I want to get all these pieces right. Here's our dream, people, is that I can create a user, as a paid user. Hey, this is what paid user 1. Here's my dream. You probably see the code in a second. But here's my dream. That I can create an object, paid user 1, that has all the properties of a user, like name and score, plus a bonus property, but has my user 1 would not have access to increase balance function, but my paid user 1 would have access to increase balance, but would also have access to user functions.
Okay. Okay. So my new user will have access to the user functions, but this new pay user, but my base user will not. Oh, okay, but my base user will not have access to this function.
David, what might I want to add to paid user functions such that it has a link to user functions so that when I go looking on this object for my function, using the proto reference on say paid user 1, if I don't find something on here, I'm going to go and look at the regular user function.
So we'll need to update is the proto for that, but this is for pay user features.
What might I want to add to this object? How might I want to make that link?
So is that what set prototype of is getting after?
What property do all objects have?
Proto.
Proto.
And proto is the place, the hidden property is the place where if JavaScript goes looking on this object for a method and doesn't find it, where does it go looking, Seth? In proto.
proto.
So it wouldn't be nice if that proto were a link up to user function.
Exactly.
So that we're going to still, come to one second, I promise. So we're going to still have a link up to that shared set of functions. But our user 1 is just going to link straight to user functions. They're never going to see this stuff.
Exactly.
But we're going to hope in a moment our paid user, let's call it paid user Terry, or we call it paid user 1 here, that they're going to go looking for functions first in paid user functions. And if they don't find something in here, they're not going to panic, they're going to look up to user functions, meaning they're going to get access to both the types of functions. This will be very nice. So how
But the thing is that why you create this object set prototype here for this new pay user that actually contains the reference for the base class and also for this new pay user functions, okay? And then you down the line, when you create now this new user, okay? You say, hey, you know what? Let me set this prototype of the pay user function. Okay. So if any object, oh my god, okay.
How do I make the proto link up to user function? Well, I use this built-in tool, object.setPrototypeOf, which takes in as its first input, its first argument, an object. Which one is it? Well, it's this one, page user functions. And then it takes in as its second input whatever you want to set proto to on the first input page user functions of the object. So whatever you want to set the proto of page user functions to, pass in as the second argument. Well, that's going to be user functions. Do we see how? Why not call it set proto of? Why? Because technically they call anything that's referenced through proto the
Exactly.
prototype of this object. But it's referenced through something called proto. This is profoundly confusing. If there were not a property elsewhere called prototype that is something totally different, which we saw earlier, maybe not so confusing. But where there is literally a property elsewhere called prototype, it seems crazy to me that you would say set prototype of when it is explicitly not setting a property called prototype. It's explicitly setting a property
It's
called
explicitly setting a proto reference.
proto. Now in the spec, it technically calls this property, even more confusingly, prototype with two square brackets around it, which is different to the prototype property. Well, that's just, I'm not even gonna, that's just ridiculous. So we'll use the term proto for it, because that is what the Chrome DevTools refers to as, and it's become pretty standard. Okay. So object.setPrototype of takes in as its first input the object, page user functions, and then says, set its proto to the second input, which is user functions. So let's just put that in here, user functions. So this is looking pretty nice, people. We have an object here that has a link up to user functions. So if we now, later on, are going to go paid user one dot increase balance, let's hope we can go and get it from here. Paid user one dot say name, we're not going to find it here. Hopefully we can still get it up here. In other words, our paid user type, or paid user object, will still get access to all the stuff that users had. Nice.
Yeah, but it's like quite redundant there. It's like quite
Let's get to
redundant.
making our paid user. Here we go. Here we go. Do we have enough room? We definitely do not.
Sorry, arguments.
Arguments, yes. They're definitely not properties. If we do assign them, they become properties. Okay, let's create that big old execution context.
Exactly. This is the
Into it we
function
go.
execution
In
context.
its local, this is going to be brutal. Make a local memory, kick us off. Susie, we're calling page user creator with a list 825. In we go. What are our first parameter argument combos? Shouldn't call them combos. Parameter argument pairings up.
So you have the const paid user, and then we're
Well, before that, we've got to handle our arguments going into our parameters. So
let's go into the function paid user function.
fantastic. Oh, hold on. Oh no. So before we go into the body of paid user creator, we've got to handle just these inputs, filling in the parameters.
Oh,
It's an easy bit to miss because it sort of seems very obvious, but they do actually go in our local memory as locally available names. So now paid name is going to be replaced by what?
the paid name is going to be replaced by
We pass in our arguments in the same order we have our parameters. So Alyssa will be paid name, and 8 will be
the paid score.
paid score, and 25 will be
The balance.
the account balance. Perfect, exactly. Spot on. And so paid is doing that ourselves again. Even though paid user creator has the properties name and then we'll do some fiddling to make it add them right now, sort of using new code. No. Why would we do that? We've got the code to add a name and a score to an object over here. So let's use that code. And then we'll do some fiddling to make it specific to a paid user. So let's go and use that code. Talk me through this first line in paid user creator.
We're setting a const new paid user equal to the return, whatever gets returned from the function user creator.
Perfect, which means we've got to go and
Into a new
Gotta
brand
go
execution
into-
context.
exit. Not exit. Execute.
A new execution
A
context.
new execution context, perfect. So hold on, new paid user will be the return value of calling user creator with what arguments?
With the arguments paid name,
Which is what's in our local memory?
Alyssa,
Alyssa, what
and then 8.
8. Excellent. And now let's create that execution context.
Exactly.
There it is. And in its local memory,
We are setting the const new user.
so Alyssa and 8 are being passed in.
Exactly. It's creating this new object that has a
Perfect. And now,
reference
so we're in user creator. I know it's off to the
Okay.
side, we're running it inside
to
of
the
paid
user
creator.
function
There it is.
and that.
And
So far so good. That's actually works as expected.
But that's not very good because this object is the one we want to be a paid user, so we want it probably to have access to paid user functions.
Exactly.
So we're probably going to need to change that, aren't we? So we're using our pre-written code to create our object, but it's already giving us a few issues. It's already kind of sticking the wrong set of functions that are going to be available on that object when it eventually comes
Completely.
out to paid user
Exactly.
one. We're going to return it out. We're going to return it into new paid user, and then return it out from there to paid user one. But it's got the wrong set of functions available.
Set of functions.
We want to have these set of functions, and then from there have access to these functions.
Exactly.
So we may need to switch out this proto in a moment. Let's have a look at it. Oh, we're going to do that. Switch out this proto for the right set of functions.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what we do
But
with
for
the
now,
object of
it's just
set
helpful to be able to
prototype. Like it's
use
like, hey, this
previous
reference, I
functionality
can have
to get our
access.
name and
Like, we need to
score.
now
Yeah,
make
there'll be many more
it
problems
this
with that. We want to use this previous
function.
functionality from user. It's also good for our mental sort of thinking about how this is laid out. Paid user is a subtype of user. And so it kind of makes sense to use the code we use to create users, to create paid users, and then mutate it a bit, rather than start from scratch. Because they are related. They're kind of hierarchically related. It's a more specific version of the user type. So it's not a bad thing to create it. It's a bit off, and then adjust it. Okay. Good, good, good. So, final. We haven't had the properties yet. Help me out, Chris. Add the properties to the new user object inside of user creator. By the way, who have I been calling on? I kind of back, so I can't remember. Was it Nick or Chris?
We were talking.
To you, Nick.
Yeah.
Really, really good by Nick, by the way. So now we hit new user.name. Help me out, Nick.
All right. New user name gets assigned.
What's the local value there for what's the local name?
What do we
It
do?
was paid name, which was
Which is Alyssa.
yeah. So we pass Alyssa into paid name, and then we pass paid name into user creator. That means we pass Alyssa into user creator where it's given the label name. Okay. And now we've got the score property. Help me out with this, Nick. What's stuck in score?
8.
8. Now we've got this lovely object here, but it's stuck inside an execution context. We want to get it out into paid user creator where we can make some changes to under its new label, new paid users. How do we get it out?
It's returned.
It's
We return
yeah,
from that.
We return this object where we have the where we have now. Sorry, we have the property Alyssa, and score is 8. Not property Alyssa. Property name is Alyssa. Score is 8. It still has its proto bond to user functions. Seth, do we want it to directly proto bond to user functions? Is that useful to us? No way. Thank you, Seth. I to say I
No
appreciate
way.
you're playing along with me the whole time. I love it very, very much. I'm very grateful. No way. That's not useful at all. I'm with Seth. No way. So what are we going to do now?
No
We
way.
return now that object into new paid user in that very next line, Seth.
We're going to assign a new object to Proto who already has its
Exactly. We're gonna assign is a new object proto.
Proto assigned to user functions.
And we're going to give up on that proto assignment. We're going to give up on that proto assignment, not to user functions anymore, and we're instead going to set new paid user. Remember, this is just how set prototype of works. The first thing you
Exactly.
pass in, you get to control its proto with the second thing you pass in. The first thing you pass in with
Exactly. The first that you pass in here is that you have control about that.
new paid user. It then takes that new paid user's proto and says whatever was there, forget about it, and stick paid user functions in there.
Okay. It's because now the mechanism. Okay. It's because the mechanism said okay. Object set prototype, which is a very confusing name, but in any case, that works as expected. Exactly as it is. Object of set prototype. It's a static method set the prototype, internal prototype. It's a warning. Changing the prototype of an object by nature of how modern JavaScript engine optimizes property access currently a very slow operation in everything. So in other words, it's like don't do this. But we are doing as a way to understand how this is working behind the scenes. In addition, the effects of altering instance are subtle and far-flung and not limited to the time spent in objects set up prototype of statement, but may extend to any code that has access to any object whose prototype has been altered. You can read more about the JavaScript engine fundamental of optimizing prototypes, but this is from Matthias Binance. Yep, it's telling you, and this is something a very, very, very good thing here about this. Is as a way to say, hey, how you should create your objects, okay? Especially the inheritance of that. So the takeaways here is that we have learned how JavaScript engine store objects and classes and how shape as inline catches and valid cell, how optimize the prototype operations. Based on this knowledge, we identify a practical JavaScript coding tip that can help boost performance. Don't mess with prototype. We are actually looking at this as a way to understand how the nature of prototype works. How can now a particular object can have access to other functionality, okay, as a way to not extend, or in a better word, in a better term, access to that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Or if you really need to, then at least do it before other codes run. But again, exactly, the objects and the parent. Okay. So the object of set prototype static method set the prototype of the internal prototype, which is a more confusing name from the specification, of a specific object to another object or null. Right? So here we got object of set prototype of the object and the prototype, or the parents. The object's new prototype, an object or null. Right? But that's exactly what we're doing here. Object of set prototype of is generally considered the proper way to set the prototype of an object. Before we have is this. And we're going to call proto because this is now how the dev tool actually, this is the name of the dev tool. If object parameter is not object's numeric string, this method does nothing without coercing the prototype here. So if the object parameter is not an object here, this method does nothing without coercing to an object or attempting to set its prototype. If you're passing me a primitive, I'm not gonna do that. Except only an object, and directly return object as a primitive value. If prototype, that's interesting. Let's put it this. Let's get into this. Okay. So it's the object dot set prototype. Let's going to define here a variable here called lottery number like 9, right? And then we pass here the lottery number. Okay. Oh, it needs also a second one. Okay, and you need the pattern as well. So let's say I'm gonna put point to null, right? Syntax redeclaration, that's right. So, well, it's going to point that to null. Doesn't do anything. In fact, it returned that primitive. It doesn't attempt to do that. In fact, it returned that. Exactly. But for security concerns, there are certain building objects that are designed to have immutable prototype. This prevents prototype pollution attacks, especially proxy-related ones. Prototype pollutions attacks. Oh my God! By using the object of set that, especially proxy-related ones, the core language only specifies object of prototype as an immutable prototype exotic object whose prototype is always null. In browser, window, and location are two other very common examples. Pseudo-classical inheriting using object of set prototype. Object of set prototype of is a set the prototype or the dunder proto-dunder of superhero prototype to human prototype. Exactly. You're gonna point to that prototype to set the prototype or inheriting change. Exactly, but this is because they are objects. there are objects there. They are exactly. Subclassing without extend is mentioned in EX6 subclassing. All right. A description, an example, specifications, browsing compatibility, that kind of thing. Okay. All right. So this is object.set prototype here is setting is the reference proto to the parent object or to all of this object. And it only accepts 2 arguments. Exactly. This is a way of how you can now have access to this prototype or this property from that. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. The object parameter is not extensible, or it is an immutable prototype exotic object, such as object prototype or window. However, the error is not thrown if the new prototype is the same value as it is. Okay. So what it's doing is now this new pay user. Oh my god, and I get it. Okay. What happened here is that when you're using is a set prototype of, you say, hey, get rid of the prototype reference that you have, and now points that to this. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then you can say, but these new objects, what it's doing is to now pointing to this relevant data, okay, which is good, to pointing to this relevant functionality, but also we want to have access to the other, to the parent to the parent objects, and that is thanks to the object.set prototype. By now, looking at the pay function or the pay user functions in this prototype and obey that reference to have access to this user function. Holy moly. This is the sophisticated way of how you can create is subclassing. In other words, how an object can have access to property and methods from the base class or from its parent class. Jesus. Holy moly, bro. God. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Did I reload this? Oh, yes. Yeah. Anyway. Wow. Wow. Okay. Because I don't want to write it down this. Definitely, I don't want to do this. Okay, I want to, because now I get it. I understand this. Holy moly. That's wild. The solution 2, exactly. That's wild. Jesus, that's wild. Okay. That's wild. Exactly here. The code. To test it. So this is now the new users. No. I gotta chat them in. where is it? The solution to here is this one. I copy, but you didn't. Come on, man. Really? Okay, no problem. Nah, I'm not gonna fight with you. No, I'm not gonna fight. No, definitely not. Not at all. Not at all. And you got this. All right. Enough of doing that. Stop trying to be funny. This one, okay. So this is create this item. User creator or base class. Okay, user creator or base class. The hell? No. User creator here. Exactly. User creator here. The base class, base or parent class. Okay. And now, holy moly. And now, holy moly, this is when things get interesting. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Oh my God. Jesus. Let's get into it. First, in fact, let me do this here so you can see what I'm doing. This is also put a practice of my skill. Put a test my skills. Because we wanted to create now a new functionality, right? We wanted to cover a particular use case for our game. We define now the users and all the property that it needs for a particular game, but also we wanted to define is our paid users. For that, as a way to now access to this property from things that we have already built, so we can reuse that, is this one. First, let me create now this function called is the new pay user. Okay, where here we're gonna receive is all the property that this particular function needs, the name and the scores. Okay, the name and the scores, as well as balance. Okay. And here we're gonna say, let me now create an object here let me now create here an object, right? Let me now create is an object called the pay user. So I can say a new pay user, where, because after all I want is to now this base properties and methods I need to run is this function called this function called user creator. Okay, user creator, that it needs the name and the score. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so it needs this. Then, okay, so because now this new object has a reference to the user creator functions, which is good, but the thing here is that we want to make this object to have a reference to its own functionality. In other words, functionality for this new pay user, which is an object that we're going to define here, const new pay user functions. To make it simple here, let's gonna put it here, pay user functions. Okay, where now this they hold is this particular functionality, like increment balance for use case, called increment balance. Okay, this is a function that we're going to now, for our use case, is to do this. Say, hey, I want you to now, whatever balance property that you have, increment that. Okay, which means let's go to define now that property there. But because this function here, this new pay user function constructor, I want you now to set this to our pay new users. Here's when we use this built-in object to say, hey, set the prototype of this new pay user object, the proto, delete that, forget about that, and now points to this new pay user functionality. You may wonder, yeah, that's great. Okay, and then add the proper methods here, which is the new pay user here, dot balance here, it is balance, and then you want to return this object, new pay user. You may wonder, yeah, but after all, we are just having now this new pay users with the functionality, with the current functionality, but we also want to now point to the base functionality, the user creator functionality. How can we do that? Oh, this is when things now get interesting as well, because you say, hey, object dot set prototype of, okay, which is the reference of this object, this new functionality. Okay, I want you to now point that to the base here, which is the paid user functions. I want you to now point to the functionality that is not defining here, but it's on the user functions here, user functions. So once you're able to understand this, okay, and then is when you say, okay, let me now create this new pay user, const pay user. Okay, when you say, hey, new pay user with the value of, say, Alice, 5 and 10. Okay, and if you want to have access to the pay user dot to the pay user, we're gonna put it here, pay user 1. Okay, now if you want to have access to the pay user here, is right now say, I don't know what is that particular thing you want to call here, is user function, but in our case is the paid user, even though when you take a look at this, it's not. Oh, okay, pay user 1 to have access to the not only increment balance, all right, but also to the paid user 1 dot dot login, right, dot login. Of course, this will not work. Okay, but actually, let me put it here in this way. And now this is the base class, the user or pay user, exactly, pay user. This new class or the child class. All right, doesn't matter. You got it. Okay, like this. So would it be better to define this something like this? I in fact would prefer to define this like so. Here, as it is. Okay, and then you got this. Okay, much better. So once you're able to copy this, okay, here now you will be able to actually log into that. It says user function is not defined because it's user function function store. Sorry, function store. Let's gonna change this to say user function. Like the user functions. No, user functions here. Wait, what? It's like the user functions here. And now this will work as expected. Let me refresh this. You are logging. That's quite interesting of how this actually works. All right. Oh my God, that's completely interesting.
Which is just a link to, let's use the purple pen so we know it's a reference, a link to paid user functions, which means this object, which is going to be our paid user 1, is going to have access to increased balance. Beautiful. But also, because paid user functions was given its own bond up to user functions, if we look to paid user functions and are looking for, say, increment, we won't find it, we won't panic, we'll look up to it, and there it will be. We're going to see that play out in a moment, don't worry. We're going to see that actually play out. What's the final thing we want to do to this object there so that it is actually a paid user type? B. Hopefully it has, all right, next bond is hidden proto. There it is, the paid user functions, which itself has a proto reference up to user functions. Here's our one more interlude before we see these other approaches to subclassing. That interlude is this. Line 1, what are we doing? What are we doing? Let's have Susie, my friend, what are we doing?
We're creating.
Let's do it. We have all the information. That was our last interlude, people. Now we are charging on to our final subclassing approach. And here we are with our penultimate subclassing approach. Here we go. Line 1. Terry, it is your moment. Walk me through what we're doing in line 1.
Defining.
Okay. So now we're going to look at the subclassing with new keyword. With new and call. Okay.
But starting on the left-hand side, we're going to build out our base. They call it base class, the one that produces others. We do the left-hand side first. Building out first our user creator function. Let's do it. We have all the information. That was our last interlude.
the subclassing here. Holy moly, bro. All right.
Building out first our user creator function. Let's do it. We have all the information. That was our last interlude, people. Now we are charging on to our final subclassing approach. And here we are with our penultimate subclassing approach. Here we go. Line 1. Terry, it is your moment. Walk me through what we're doing in line 1.
Defining a function, user creator, passing 2 parameters, name and score.
Right. We're not worried about the parameters quite yet, but yes, they are absolutely there. Raise your hand if we think we've got to bring back our awareness of it being a function-object combo. David's right.
Of course.
It was definitely my answer to yes voice. Because we are now going to run this user creator with the new keyword changing up its behavior inside.
So we are now going to call is exactly. We are now going to use is the new keyword to see how can we create subclassing in exactly how can we create subclasses with it,
including when it creates that object automatically, having that object be linked up to user creator in its object format, the prototype property, which is itself an object. But we are almost there. We're going to be done in under 3 hours from now. No more than 3 hours. I can guarantee you. No, we're almost there. Folks, look at this. Wait. Done. That's it. Does that help when you see all this? Probably not, but we're almost there. Okay, so user creator. Oh, now, yeah, but you've now switched back. I'd gone to not looking at that name sign. Chris, help me out. Help me out with the full declaration of user creator. It's a function. It's a function plus object, which has on it
This prototype.
prototype. There's only 2 answers correct in this talk. It's either this or prototype. You got the wrong one that time. But prototype, which is itself an object. There it is. Into which we're going to put any functions that objects that get returned out of running user creator with a new keyword are going to have access to through their proto property. Okay, so let's put user creator itself an object.
Exactly.
There it is. Into which we're going to put any functions that objects that get returned out of running user creator with a new keyword are going to have access to through.
Exactly. But these functions we're going to have now access. So the function objects, you can have access to the properties under the prototype. This is when you can define all of this.
Their proto property. Okay. So let's put those functions in there. There it is. Into which we're going to put any functions that objects that get returned out of running user creator with a new keyword are going to have access to through their proto property. That prototype, which is itself an object. There it is. Into which we're going to put any functions.
So first, let's run the user1.say name. Okay. Let's walk through. Let's walk through the user1.say name property. Statement. Okay. Or in this case, it's going to walk through the left side. It'll be much more adequate. Yeah. Something like this. You can in fact extend that. Subclassing in solution here, exactly. I think we put it there. Subclassing in solution 3. Right? This one. Okay. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting. Let's walk through this. So first, so we define our user creator function object. Okay, our function creator, our function. We define our user creator function object. Okay, that any property that or where all of our functionality. Okay, so we define our user creator function objects where all of our functionality here, where all of our functionality will live inside of the prototype function object. Okay, the user creator. All right. So we define our user creator function objects where all of our functionality will live inside of the prototype function object. Okay, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
That objects that get returned out of running user creator with a new keyword are going to have access to.
Where now functions, when we run the user creator function with the new keyword, we will have access to. With the new keyword, we will have access to. Exactly. With the new keyword, we will have access to the prototype. But again, he mentioned that.
This prototype.
Prototype. There's only two answers correct in this talk. It's either this or prototype. You got the wrong one that time. But prototype, which is itself an object, there it is, into which we're going to put any functions that objects that get returned.
Into which we are going to put any functions
turned out of running user creator.
Into which we're going to put any functions that when we run user creator, okay, into which we're going to put any functions that when we run user creator, into which we're gonna put any functions that when we run user creator, we can have access
with a new keyword are going to have.
With the new keyword are going to have access to that through the, we're going to have exactly, which we're going to put any functions that when we run the user creator with the new keyword, or that function constructor with the new keyword, we're going to have access to that. Okay, are we going to have access to functions, to those functions, through the prototype function object, or through the prototype property.
Access to through their proto property. Objects that get returned out of running user creator with the new keyword are going to have access to through their.
Except I'm gonna have access to those functions through the prototype proto. Exactly, I'm going to have access to those functions through the proto property. But again, here is describing this way of, especially when you're using the new keyword, which is something useful, especially when you need to define this function to say, hey, since we are creating this new function with the dot, with this value like this, but since we are defining as the user creator function, and when we run that function with the new keyword, we're going to have access through the functions that we put on under the prototype, thanks through okay, I just want to clarify here. Anytime you look at new keyword here, what it's doing behind the scene is that, hey, this function constructor now this function constructor where these function constructors where people put this function constructor has some functions under the prototype that, using the new keyword, we can have access to them thanks through the proto property. And that is something important here to recognize. So in other words, when we run a function user creator with the new keyword, we can have access to the functions that were put into the prototype, okay, into the prototype function object property, in which we can have access to the function that were put in the prototype functions object property through the proto property. This, and again, this is something repetitive. This is something that once you know what's going on here, especially with the new keyword here, this is true for all of this object that we create too, unless that mechanism change down the line. But right now it's just like this, right now it's just like this. So that makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. Totally. Oh my God, that makes a ton of sense. Completely, bro. Holy moly. Okay. So when we run a function constructor, in this case user creator, with the new keyword, we can have access to the property that were put under the proto function object property through the proto change, through the prototype, through the proto change. Okay, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. So behind the scenes, someone put a couple methods under the prototype, okay, and with the new keyword, what it's doing is, first, this is putting this value as an empty object, then now establish is adding all of the property or for this object, setting is the reference under the proto object here that can have access to all of the functionality through the proto that links to the prototype function objects that is returning as this new object here. That's quite interesting. That's very, very, very interesting.
Okay, so let's put those functions in there. David, if you don't mind putting those functions in that object as kind of completely in technical communication as you can, if you don't mind.
There's a property called sayname. Oh, sorry, you want to start at the top? Okay. Yep,
Well, if you don't mind sort of saying, so user created .prototype.sayname, how's it get in? Talk me through the lookup and assignment process. This would be
Yep,
Well, if you don't mind sort of saying, so user created .prototype.sayname, how's it get in? Talk me through the lookup and assignment process. This would be as precise as possible.
JavaScript is going to look up at the same name function under the user object. You take a look at that. It doesn't find that, but it doesn't panic. It look up for the proto hidden property that points to the prototype user creator function object, and then he access to sayname. We find sayname, we run it.
User created .prototype.sayname.
user creator.prototype.sayname is a function.
Right, but let's make sure. Okay.
Oh, you want me to look it up first, or just? I thought we were
Just sort of tell me how when JavaScript sees that, it doesn't go
Gotcha.
put function. It
So
goes
user creator
yeah.
in the global memory.
Perfect. Finds it.
Yes. Inside of there, it looks for a prototype.
Inside of its object portion of its function object combo, finds prototype property.
And it looks for a sayname.
Right, and then assigns, which isn't on an object, assigns on that object a same name function. Excellent. Seth, you want to do the same but for login? Or sorry, is it login? What is it? Increment, sorry, yeah, increment.
So we're going to assign the increment method on the prototype object on the object portion of user creator.
What is it? Increment, sorry, yeah, increment.
So we're going to assign the increment method on the prototype
Seth, you want to do the same but for login? Or sorry, is it login? What is it? Increment, sorry, yeah, increment.
So we're going to assign the increment method on
Yeah, we're going to assign the increment method to the prototype
the
object.
prototype object on the object portion of user.
We're gonna add this the increment object prototype on the object portion of the user creator.
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you, man. That is exactly what we're going to do. Like
On the object portion of user.
but for login, right, and then assigns, which isn't on an object, assigns on that object a same name.
Okay. Now, let's go. Yeah, let's go. Now let's go to. So let's go. Now let's go. Yeah. Let's walk through this code. Okay. Yep. Yeah, let's walk through this code. So define a user creator function. Okay, exactly. Define a user creator function, then add same name. Yeah, add same name function to the prototype
Name function. Excellent.
Object on the object portion of.
Same, but for login. Oh, sorry, is it login? What is it? Increment. Sorry, yeah, increment.
We're going to assign the increment method on the prototype.
Exactly. We're gonna, because it's that we're going exactly. So we are going to assign. We're going to assign to say name a new function to the prototype portion of the user creator.
Object on the object portion of user creator.
On the object
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you, man. That is
The prototype.
And Seth, you want to do the same but for login? Or sorry, is it login? What is it? Increment. Sorry, yeah, increment.
We're going to assign the increment method on the prototype.
we're going to assign the increment method. Exactly. Because we're going to assign the we're going to assign the same name methods to the prototype methods exactly to the prototype object portion of the user creator, or in this case of the object function combo.
Object on the object portion of user creator.
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you, man. That is exactly what we're going to do. I couldn't have put it better. That level of precision is good for the mind. It helps you yourself have the clarity of what's going on here. Fantastic.
Exactly. We're going to assign the same name. We're going to assign the same name methods to the prototype objects to the prototype objects portions of the user creator function object. Of the user creator function object, and I think this is something
Okay,
quite
now let's get on to
interesting.
making our user one object. Is that Michael? Talk me through this, Michael.
So we're going to create a const user one.
Perfect. Uninitialized.
Yeah, uninitialized, and then we're going to do
So we are
execution context.
Perfect. To execute what function?
we are going
user
to
creator.
Fantastic. Oh, can we
assign.
just say thank you, Michael, not getting the new keyword thinking it makes it
Yes,
special.
and
No,
we're going to
it's an execution
assign-
context for the execution of the user creator function. Very well put, Michael. There it is. User creator function with
We're going to
fill and
assign
5.
the
Okay,
increment.
execution context, but it is an execution context with a little bit of a sort of fiddling done in it.
Yes, we're
because
going
of
to
what
assign
keyword?
the increment
New keyword, exactly. The new
methods
keyword is going to
to
do a
the
bunch of stuff in here automatically.
prototype
What is that stuff? We'll see in a
object
second. Before we get to that stuff, let's just make our local
object
memory and handle
of
first our arguments. Terry, give me the arguments inside the user creator.
Phil and 5.
Name is set to Phil.
so we're going to assign the
Right, so the name parameter.
increment
Do you see why it's so important? Parameter here,
prototype.
so we don't think these are properties on an
Yeah, we're going
object.
to
The name parameter is now
we're going to
locally
define an
available
increment
inside the user
method
creator
to the
as
prototype
argument, the value
object
Phil. The
portion
store parameter is now locally available
of
as the
the
store argument Fine.
user
Beautiful.
creator
Right, now,
or
the
of
new
the
keyword takes over.
function.
Who feels comfortable now to tell me all three
object
things
for
the new
that.
keyword automates
Makes
inside?
a lot of sense.
Yeah, Chris, let's do it, man. So what's the very first thing it does?
It creates a new object for this.
This is a new object. Beautiful. This is a new empty, empty object, but with what?
It sets the proto.
Aha, beautiful. Sets its proto. Everything in blue we are not doing. It's being done for us. Sets its proto to user creator dot prototype, this lovely object into which we stored our functions. That this object, when it gets returned out, better have access to. It will. And what's the final thing that it does? Oh, we're not going to get to that yet. We'll come to that in a second. The proto is set. Great. Now, Elliot, take over with the code we wrote.
Name gets set to fill.
The name
The name property
on the auto-created
object.
with the label
This.
this. Excellent. So try and be as explicit and complete as you can, just to keep the mind clear on what is incredibly kind of finicky stuff. So first, starting on the left-hand side. Oh, can we just say thank you, Michael? Not getting the new keyword, thinking it makes it special. No, it's an execution context for the execution of the user creator function. Very well put, Michael. There it is. User creator. Don't want to say parameter here, so we don't think these are properties on an object. The name parameter is now locally available inside a user creator as the argument, the value fill. The score parameter is now locally available as the score argument 5. Beautiful. All right, now the new keyword takes over. Who feels comfortable now to tell me all three things a new keyword automates inside? Yeah, Chris, let's do it, man. So what's the... Yeah, Chris. Memory and hand...
User creator.
have the clarity of what's going on here. Fantastic. Okay, now let's get on to making our user one object. Let's have Michael talk me through.
So this is our diagram so far. Okay. This, Michael.
So we're going to create a user creator.
Fantastic. Oh, can we just save keyword? Exactly. The new keyword is going to do a handle first. Our arguments. Terry. Right. So the name parameter. Do you see why it's so important to say parameter here? So we don't think these are properties on an object. The name parameter is now locally available inside a user creator as the argument, the value fill. The score parameter is now locally available as the score argument 5. Beautiful. All right. Now the new keyword takes over. Who feels comfortable now to tell me all three things a new keyword automates inside?
Set the value of this as empty. Second, set the proto reference to point to the prototype portion of the user creator object function.
Yeah.
And lastly, it will return.
Chris, let's do it, man. So what's the very first thing it does?
It creates a new object for this.
This is a new proto, this lovely object into which we stored our functions. That this object, when it gets returned out, better have access to. It will. And what's the final thing that it does? Oh, we're not going to get to that yet. We'll come to that in a second. The proto is set. Great. Now, Elliot, take over with the code we wrote.
Name gets set to fill.
The name
Name property.
property on the auto-created
Object.
with the label this.
This.
Excellent, folks. So try and be as explicit and complete as you can, line Elliot.
Or for this object.
Perfect.
It's set to 5.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Elliot. But it's stuck inside of the user creator function's execution context, and we want it global. So do we return it? I don't see any returning it out. So what is the final thing that this keyword, sorry, the new keyword automates?
Returns the object.
Returns the object. Out it comes into what global constant, Elliot?
User 1.
Into user 1. Fantastic. Thank you so much, man. There it is, into user 1, where it's got name, fill, score, 5, and a hidden proto bond
to the
oh,
prototype.
the bonds
Exactly. Bounds to the prototype object portion of the function constructor. In our case, the user creator.
We're doing well. We're almost there. To this lovely object full of functions that means our user one object's got its data, and without it being copies, got access to the functionality it needs, which remember is all we ever wanted. Bundle our data and functionality together. Have our user data, name, and score.
Bundle our relevant data and functionality together.
Stop looking at the sun outside and thinking of what could be. See how valuable, how fascinating it is to have these together. Have our user data, name, and score. Stop looking at the sun outside and thinking of what could be. Ever wanted. Bundle our data and functionality together. Have our user data, name, and score. Stop looking at the sun outside. Data and functionality together. Have our user data, name, and score. Stop looking at the sun outside and thinking of what could be. See how valuable, how fascinating it is to have these. Look at are you excited? I'm excited by the prospect of having our data and because it's going to make our lives as engineers, and we have to do that every day, right?
Yeah.
It makes our lives so easy because look at this user. All I want is my functionality there available on the right hand side of the dot. Seth, it's your moment, my friend. Walk me through the lookup process. User one is in
Global memory.
global memory. It's there. Increment is dot. Seth, it's your moment, my friend.
No. I freak out a little.
Freak out a little.
Then I go,
Oh, it's there, it's
our
there.
error, crash.
Well, that's my fault. There it is. Increment.
now no.
We sort it and we find it and we use it. Beautiful. Excellent. Thank you, Seth. We didn't even. Why do we use increment? Whatever. We do say name here, but they're both up there, aren't they? So let's just change that. Actually, it should be say name. Yeah, excellent. We'll clear all this up later. There we go. Say name. So we did the same as the previous version.
Clarity, man. When we run a function, exactly, when we run a function with the new keyword, we can have access to the function that we're putting the prototype object portion of the function object creator through the prototype. And here are a couple things that we are doing. So the new keyword is automating exactly. The new keyword is automating the process of handcrafting the reference for us. It's automating the process of handcrafting the reference for us. Handcrafting the reference for us. And there are a couple things that is doing behind the scenes the new keyword. as we can see here, right? So the new keyword set now the value of this as this new instance. It creates a blank plain JavaScript object for convenience. Let's call it new instance. Then make the pointer of that new object created to the prototype function, to the prototype portion, exactly, to the prototype portion of the function, to the prototype. It set now the reference of the proto to points to the prototype object, to point to the points to the prototype function object portion of the user creator, or of the function constructor. Okay. Execute the constructor function with the given argument that binds the new instance of the, and as the this context, all reference to the this in the constructor now refers to the new instance. And that's exactly what it's doing. It's now setting the value of this to empty object, okay? And now look at the proto of this new object creator and set and points that to the proto. Look at the proto. Yeah. First, set the value of this as empty object. Second, look up the proto property, hidden property, that points to the prototype object portion of the function object, in our case the user creators, and then return that new object for that. So normally constructors don't return a value, but they can choose to do so to override the normal object creation process, right? Normally. So if the constructor function returns a non-primitive, this return value becomes a result of the whole new expression. Otherwise, if the constructor function doesn't return anything or return the primitive, new instance is returning instead. So normally constructor function doesn't return it, but if you want, for example, change if what is going to be returned, you can do that on the function constructor. Damn it. On the function constructor. So for example, if in our case we say, hey, I want you to now return here this new object where you have the name, where you have the make, where you have the make, and this will only return is that new object, eagle, but usually we want us to return is the value of this. Oh, we got lucky. We got lucky to return we got lucky to return that, because for example, if we try to access to the model, it say, hey, no, that was not defined. So there's a runtime error, Interesting. Very, very interesting. You may wonder why this is important, why this is relevant. Oh, this is relevant, especially if you're going to deal with backend work, which is something, again, part of this new era of pushing all of these things, right? By looking at the front end and at the back end, all right? Part of these things is that eventually this will integrate into one single place. The front end and the back end will be one. I think this is what I think that will happen. Yeah. Especially once you have one single language.
But now we've got our store of functions automatically linked to, with the help of a new keyword that automatically creates the object that came out of user creator. By this point, you should start getting a little bit familiar with this approach.
Completely. So here we finally now are bundling relevant functionality with data, okay, with the new keyword. All right, okay, makes a lot of sense, makes a ton of sense. But now how can we make is the subclassing here?
Now we need to see if
Creating a subclass with a constructor, which is this. Create an object with new. Okay. What the F? Really? Okay. So all of this was to create a new object. Okay. Create a new object. Or create an object. Create an object with new. Okay. That's it. Now we're going to create this subclassing, bro. And now we're going to create this subclassing, bro. Bro and girls, boys and girls, men and women, create a subclassing object, or creating a subclass constructor. Exactly, because it says create a subclass object, creating a subclass with a constructor. So creating a subclass with a constructor.
we can create, still using the new keyword approach, a paid user 1. This is potentially a little bit tough because we're going to have a new keyword be like a hammer to hit, you know, like when you use a hammer for any task. That new keyword only does one thing. Inside a page user creator, it's going to create an empty object automatically with the label this. That's going to link to the proto, whatever page user creator is, so proto of the page user creator dot prototype, and then it's going to return that object out. That's pretty like, it's going to do that whatever happens. We're using new keyword on page user creator, that's what it's going to do. So we're going to have to be really smart as to how we use that and still get to reuse the user creation code and have them work together. Because it's going to be a little bit complex, and that's why we take control again with the help of cool that allows us to take control about this assignment inside a user creator. Because we're going to use that user creator code again. I do not want to have to write code to reassign name and score inside a page user creator, and usually it wouldn't be 2 properties I'm grabbing from user. I'm grabbing 50 properties. I don't want to resit them all on there again. I want to use the user creator function to add those properties, but it's going to be a bit messy because that user creator function required a new keyword that created an object, but we're using a new keyword over here that's creating a different object. So how are these two folk going to work together? Well, what we're going to do is we're not even going to use user creator with a new keyword. It's really, it's really interesting. We're not even going to use user.
Exactly. We're not going to use this with a new keyword.
We're going to use user creator independent of it. Well, then what the hell does this refer to? Don't panic. We're going to use it with the call.
The call, and then we're going to pass the reference to that.
User creator to be this that was the auto-created object in page user creator.
So now we can make. So now we can make a use. Oh my God! We're creating a side effect here.
We're going to use this one in user creator and have it indirectly be mutated from within user creator. It is one of the most intricate, finicky little pieces of all of Java.
Yeah, man. It's one of the most finicky and intricate. One of the interesting thing of this finicky, interesting. One of the most finicky parts. An interesting part of JavaScript, especially with the subclassing using the new keyword, is that actually what powers the entire internet. Jesus. Is what actually what makes the internet is what it is. Jesus. That's quite wild, bro. That's totally wild.
Because we're going to have a new keyword be like a hammer to hit, you know, like when you use a hammer for any task. That new keyword only does one thing. Inside a page user creator, it's going to create an empty object automatically with the label this. That's going to link.
So, how can we create an object that contains an object that contains is a reference of the functionality from the base class with the new keyword, because at the end of the day, anytime we create anytime we use the new keyword to create an object, is gonna do this: set the value of this to an empty object, assign the properties to this value, set the set the donder reference to the prototype function object portion, to the prototype function object portion, and return a new object here, and return this, or aka the new object. So so how Jesus F Christ. Jesus F Christ. And this is solution exec with the class using constructor for that. So exactly, we don't need to run that function. I mean, because that function will return is an object, but that object, it will have is the value of this. We need to pass is the value of this as a reference with all the property that it needs to, whether it's call or bind, whether it's call or apply. Okay. Exactly. In the case of apply is this. And now we're going to add that, define also the prototype for this, and now create the reference for ourselves. Pay user creator prototype points to the user creator prototype, or the other is a set prototype. Where you say, hey, make that, so points to the prototype for that. Yeah, damn it. Oh my God, exactly. So because at the end of the day, anytime we use the new keyword to create an object, is going to do this: set the value of this an empty object, assign the property to the this, set the proto reference to the prototype functions object portions, return this, aka the new object. Okay. And but so this is when we run the function with the call method method to pass the relevant data using this, okay, then this context of this function that is pointing to this, because at the end of the day, the function of the value this, okay, let's take a look now at this, how this behave, by the way, in callbacks and arrow function, in constructor, but it's in constructor of function callbacks in normal function context. Exactly, inside of the function, the value of this depends on how the function is called. Think about this as the hidden parameter of a function, just like the parameters declared in the function definition. This is binding that the language create you when the function body is evaluated. So it's creating by default. Anytime it creates a new execution context, a new function execution context, when the function body is evaluated. For a regular function, not an arrow function, bound function. Exactly. For a regular function, the value of this is the object that the function is accessed on. It's the function that is accessed on. It's whatever is on the left side here. In other words, if the function call in its form object of function, then this refers to the object that is being called. So it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so this is when we run the function with the call methods to pass relevant data using this, where in the function, in the function context, it is value is exactly in the function context, it is value the value of this is the object that the function is accessed on. Exactly, is the value. It is value is whatever is on the left side when we run the function. Okay, again, this is our rules for this. Interesting, very, very interesting. Okay, which means exactly, which means our data. Which means our data. Okay, perfect. Okay, it is values whatever is on the left side when we run the function, which means our data. Totally, bro, totally. God damn it. So this is when we run the function with the call method to pass the relevant data. Exactly, where the value of this is whatever is on the left side when this function was called. Okay, so we pass so we pass the value of this to so we pass the value of this to okay, so we pass the value of this to that function constructor. That after it runs that, it will so after it runs that, it will return the value of this with, yeah, the value of this with the proper object, with the base object data. Exactly. With the base object data, and it is functionality. Bind to the proto. God damn it. Completely. Jesus freaking Christ. Oh my God. Holy moly. So once, and then you're going to return this new object. The thing here is that this new object that now has a reference, okay, where the proto has a reference to the, yeah, the proto has a reference. In other words, it creates, its value is passed as a side effect. And a side effect is something that, and the side effect is something that happened outside of the function. Okay? Is in the side effect. Its value is passed as a side effect. Yeah, its value is passed as a side effect that happened outside of the function. Okay. Its value is passed as a side effect. aka it mutates the state, of the other, it mutates the state of the other, of the outer function. It is passed as a side effect, bro. It means that it mutates the chains of another function, or the outer value there. Of another function. That's what it is. God damn. And then you need to find a way to actually set the proto to that. Okay? Because after all, this paid user creator, okay? Okay. It's going to create now the link to that. It's going to create now the link to that.
To the proto, whatever page user creator is, so proto of the page user creator dot prototype, and then it's going to return that object out. That's pretty like, it's going to do that whatever we. This object is going to be linked to by any objects, page user 1, page user 2, page user 50, that come out of running page user creator with a new keyword. They're going to have their proto bond to this object. So we want to put in that object, and I kind of want to do it first. I'm not sure I didn't. That's why it's a little bit silly the way I did this, but it's okay. We want that object to also have its proto bond be up to these functions. Remember that from last time? So that we have access to the specific paid user functions like increase balance, but also still to all the regular user functions. So how do we make that bond? David, I asked you this last time. What do I need to add to this object to have it have a link up to these functions? What does this object need to have a link up to these functions?
Proto.
Proto. Spot on. A hidden proto property which would link up. But how do I set its proto? Well, actually, I can just use set prototype of, can't I? But for some reason, I decided to do it this way, which was to completely overwrite the object. I'm going to change this, but it's fine. Completely, it's both legitimate, but to completely overwrite the object, prototype object, and stick a brand new object in there, right? Object.create returns out a brand new empty object, which has its proto set to
The user creator prototype.
Exactly. There it is, and that then links up to, and that means this object here is ready to go, to link up here. That's fantastic. All right. Good. And now we want to make sure that this object has its paid user specific function. Seth, tell me what we do in our next line here. Page user creator dot prototype dot increase balance. Tell me what we do.
Adding a method called increase balance to the prototype object on page user creator.
Yeah, excellent, man. Okay, now we've done all our setup here. There it all is. We have a function that when called with a new keyword, pages creator hopefully returns out an object, we'll store in pages 1, and that object, because this function is going to be called with a new keyword, is hopefully going to have a bond to the pages creator prototype object when we find increase balance. And then that is going to still have a bond up to user creator prototype, so that these functions are all available to our page user 1, but so that our user 1 still only has access to our user only functions. Okay, let's get creating page user 1. Here we go. Susie, left-hand side, we're on const page user 1. What is that telling us to do, Susie?
Const user 1, we're
Okay, that's quite interesting. That's totally interesting. That'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.